Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Colorado Rockies franchise here on MLB the Show 25. It is the 2027 trade deadline. A lot of players have been moved and a lot of teams have made huge acquisitions to put themselves in position to win the 2027 World Series. There are a lot of teams to go over, so let's just jump on it. The start will begin in the AL East with the surprising Toronto Blue Jays. They are currently leading the division by just half a game against the Baltimore Orioles, a roster that lost a ton of talented players like Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero, and others to make the playoffs this year and maybe even win the AL East. And after the trade deadline, they have definitely pushed those odds in their favor. The first trade on the docket for them was a trade for Christian Javier from the Houston Astros. Javier is having a bit of a down year in Houston compared to his 2026 campaign, but that's probably just because Houston has been struggling this year and will likely miss the playoffs. But Toronto believes that this guy can bounce back and find form like he did last season, where he averaged an ERA of under 3 and had only allowed 54 earned runs. To acquire him, they had to give up a couple of prospects, one in third baseman Cutter Coffey, and number 11 in their organization, starting pitcher Jake Belos. Not a bad trade in the slightest in terms of getting Christian Javier, but they also wanted to upgrade their outfield. Currently starting out there is a 69 overall Nathan Lukes at center field, next to Anthony Santander, and recently Francis Dinellan was the right fielder. They weren't certain that it would work out. In fact, they went and got themselves a rental at the deadline, the acquisition of one of the 2023 catalysts for the World Series in Texas, Adolis Garcia. Adolis, he hasn't really had a great season in Cincinnati. It's a bit better than his 2026 campaign with the Rangers, but in terms of what we know him as in the past, it hasn't been the same since 2023. With him being in a contract year and only being 34 years of age, the question this offseason will be whether or not Toronto wants to bring him back. In order to acquire Adolis, they did give up another top 20 prospect in baseball, shortstop Josh Kasevich. I am curious to see where Toronto will go from here. They are definitely a team that lacks star power, but they are a very solid team and formidable unit. Next up on the docket is the Baltimore Orioles. Baltimore has been a little underwhelming this year after making the World Series last year, but they are still a solid team and they should make the playoffs. They are one of the best teams in all of baseball, and it's only going to get better because they were able to land one of the top starting pitchers on the trade market, Dylan Cease from the Texas Rangers. Dylan Cease was in San Diego for 2 seasons, left for Texas to get a bag, and things just haven't worked out for Texas. Not exactly Dylan Cease himself, albeit this year he is averaging nearly 4.5 for an ERA. But Texas as a whole has just not been able to resurface as a playoff contender, and things are getting dire over there, which is why they have started to ship off some of their most notable players. In order to acquire him though, Baltimore did give up quite a bit in terms of prospects. Starting pitcher Willis Nelson was number 4 in the Baltimore Orioles organization. He's gone. First baseman Anderson De Los Santos, number 17 in Baltimore's organization. He's now gone. And left fielder Reed Trimble was number 19 in Baltimore's organization. But Baltimore gets what they feel like could be the final piece to a World Series contender. And honestly, they kind of need to break that glass ceiling. A team salary of almost $322 million. That is a very steep price to pay for one of the smaller markets in all of baseball. But none of that's going to matter if they can find a way to win the World Series. The final team of note in the AL East was the Boston Red Sox. Hanging around in the wild card race, they want to finally make the playoffs after missing it every year since 2021. They still have a solid team, a lot of elite talent throughout the outfield, but their starting pitching lineup is a bit shaky. But that changes with this acquisition. Framber Valdez from the Cincinnati Reds. Valdez is currently cost control for 2 more years following 2027, and he is one of the better pitchers on the market. He has had a very solid year for the Cincinnati Reds, an ERA of 3.22, and has struck out 110 batters. However, because of the lack of run production in Cincinnati this year, it is the reason why he is currently a win-loss record of 8-10. but that should change now that he is in Boston. As for who they gave up a starting pitcher on the Major League roster in Garrett Whitlock, center fielder Miguel Bleis, who was number 4 in their organization, and second baseman Framey De Leon, who is number 18 in the organization. So Boston gets an upgrade at the starting pitcher. Cincinnati gets a change in starting pitcher with a guy who's better cost control wise on a team-friendly contract for the foreseeable future. With that being said, the AL East will be a 3-team race for the division, possibly, but at least 2 of the teams should end up making the postseason. So I am excited to see how things turn out. The New York Yankees are having a really bad season by their standards. They have been struggling immensely, and as a result, they are on the outside looking in for a playoff spot. In terms of what this roster can do moving forward, it is uncertain that they'll ever make it back to the World Series while they still have Aaron Judge. The roster is getting older, players are in and out of the lineup, and they are just looking towards the future at this point with the organization, which is why they sent Luis Gil packing to Detroit. Detroit is going to get a second starting pitcher. Detroit acquires an upgrade for their starting pitching rotation, and New York, meanwhile, gets some prospects and players to start bolstering their farm system, as it is one of the worst in all of baseball. They acquire starting pitcher Kevin Eden, who's number 9 in Detroit's organization, first baseman Oliver Lovell, and shortstop Omar Vera. New York wasn't done though in terms of the selling at the deadline. They also decided to trade away closing pitcher Devin Williams and decided to trade him to the team that beat him in the 2024 World Series, the LA Dodgers. The Dodgers get a huge upgrade for their bullpen rotation. Meanwhile, the New York Yankees acquire more prospects to rebuild their farm system. They acquire starting pitcher Jackson Ferris, who was number 4 in the Dodgers organization, second baseman Bruce Arrington, who was ranked 13th, and center fielder Harmon Clark, who was ranked 14th. This needed to be done. They did miss the playoffs in 2026, and they are expected to miss the playoffs as well in 2027. So for now, at the very least, they get to slowly start rebuilding their farm system, as I've mentioned earlier, and begin to reset the timeline so where they can start competing as soon as possible again. As for who else traded or made acquisitions in the AL Central, were the Kansas City Royals. Kansas City has a lot of good prospects, and they have a really solid team right now led by Cole Reagans and Bobby Witt Jr. But they do believe they can get more out of this current roster, and they are in position to compete for the AL Central Division. As a result, they went fishing in the trade market and walked away with a very solid option. Ranger Suarez from the St. Louis Cardinals. St. Louis Cardinals have been rebuilding for several years now. They haven't gotten much better, and the players they've brought in have not been able to move the needle for them to become a playoff team again. And so, as a result, they are finally deciding to tear down the foundation of this roster and begin the rebuild they've sorely needed for several years now. Not only do Kansas City acquire Ranger Suarez to bolster their starting pitching rotation, but they also acquire a very solid relief pitcher, AJ Puck. This resulted in a 5-player swing for the Cardinals. Catcher Blake Mitchell, who was number 5, starting pitcher Jake Connor, who was number 6, Spencer James, who was a relief pitcher, ranked 7th, center fielder Carson Rocaforte, who was number 9, and shortstop Julian Stone, who was ranked 15th. It is a crazy trade to have made to some people, but the Royals felt like it needed to be done. The AL Central is ripe for the taking. If they can just get one guy that can move the needle to help them become a playoff contender, a true playoff contender. Then we get to the AL West. In terms of teams who made any sort of moves, the only one of note was the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners have been positioned for a while now to become a World Series contender, and now they have finally spread their wings, have taken flight. They are one of the best teams in all of baseball and have been very dominant from the start of the year. While there are signs of weakness in their batting lineup, their starting pitching and their pitchers in general is where the team's strength lies, and they decided to add upon that strength even further. A trade from Cincinnati, one of the best starting pitchers in all of baseball, Hunter Green. He will go from Cincinnati Red to Emerald Green. He still hasn't captured or recaptured the magic of his 2024 season, but that's just because Cincinnati has been very shaky as an organization. Not only is he cost control for 2 more years, but he's on a very team-friendly salary of $8.8 million for every season, meaning they still have enough money to sign other guys of extreme importance and players of note. At the same time, they also got a backup for Cal Raleigh, catcher Jake Rogers. Jake Rogers was was having a solid year as a backup catcher for Cincinnati, and now he's just coming over to do pretty much the same thing for Seattle, while also being cost control for next year, 2028. Now, as for what Seattle had to give up in return, it was quite a bit. 5 players were sent off, all in their top 20 for prospects. Shortstop Dave DeJong, who was number 1 in the Mariners organization. Second baseman Justin McGaffick, number 12. Shortstop Tommy Aaron, ranked 13. Starting pitcher Tyler Go, number 16. And catcher Jordan Desan, who was ranked 20th. If all goes according to plan, there is a chance that we may get the Baltimore Orioles and the Seattle Mariners for a best of 7 in the ALCS. And I hope that ends up happening, because these teams are stacked on paper and might be the 2 best teams right now in the American League. Fingers crossed, folks. As for the rest of the AL West, for the Angels, Astros, and Rangers, they all sold at the deadline. Did mention the Rangers earlier about their trade of Dylan Cease to Baltimore, but that was not the only one. They did end up trading closing pitcher Mason Miller. He's been shipped off to the San Francisco Giants. In return, Texas acquired center fielder Henry Chavez, who was number 5 for the Giants, and starting pitcher Henry Baez, who was ranked 6th in the Giants organization. They also sold off relief pitcher Robert Garcia, sent him to the Philadelphia Phillies, and acquired 2 prospects, Christian McGowan, who is a starting pitcher, and relief pitcher Drew James. A lot of the prospects they did acquire from these teams are ETA times of 2027, and so the hope for the Texas Rangers is that they can make their MLB debut by next season and become contributors right away. The Houston Astros have been smoldering. The Astros have regressed every year since their World Series in 2022, and for the last 2 seasons they have missed the playoffs as well, which is why they also decided to be massive sellers at the deadline. Not only did they send off Christian Javier, but they also sent to San Diego starting pitcher Spencer Arrighetti. In return, they also acquired a starting pitcher Boston Bateman, who was number 15 in the Padres organization, and a relief pitcher Tomas Mata, who was ranked 18th. However, the big piece, Josh Hader, has been traded to the Philadelphia Phillies in what they believe to be the final piece to a World Series championship team. Houston, in return, receives shortstop Ed Howard, who is ranked 17th in the Phillies, and prospect right fielder Josh Spikerman. Like Texas, a lot of them have MLB ETAs of 2027, 2028, and a few of them are also 2029. So hopefully they can make their appearances in the MLB very soon and be contributors for Houston. The last team in the division, the Los Angeles Angels, things just haven't worked out during the Mike Trout era. They are set to miss the playoffs again, and the writing is officially on the wall. They were able to acquire Justin Steele after he left Chicago and hit free agency. However, things have not worked out for him in Los Angeles. As a result, LA sends him to the Miami Marlins, who have resurged as a playoff contender. For starting pitcher Thomas White, who is ranked 4th in Miami's organization, third baseman Yendy Rojas, who is ranked 9th, and relief pitcher Lewis Singer. This one trade does give them a few prospects to add to their organization, some who will end up here on the top 20, probably head into the offseason and start to reset the rotting foundation and actually begin the rebuild that they've sorely needed for several years now. The New York Mets are one of many teams that are trying to break through the glass ceiling. They didn't acquire Juan Soto for nothing, damn it. They want to try and win a World Series. This move may actually get that done. A rental of Shane McClanahan from the Tampa Bay Rays. In return, Tampa Bay receives starting pitcher Brandon Sprout, number 5 in the Mets organization, second baseman William Lugo, who is ranked 18th in their organization, and relief pitcher Clifford Gallegos, who was ranked 19th. Tampa Bay sends out one of their best, fire solid prospects in return, the usual stuff. In return, the Mets get a really damn good starting pitcher. The NL Central has been terrible this year. I can see why the game projected the Pittsburgh Pirates to win the division. Only one team in the division made a move: the Chicago Cubs. They acquired right fielder Stone Garrett from the Washington Nationals. In return, the Nats get relief pitcher Frank Gomez and second baseman Quinn McDaniel. At this point, arguably have won the division by default. As long as they can remain healthy, they should be able to win the division with ease. The team I really want to talk about has been the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds have been very disappointing, like immensely disappointing. They have had their ups and downs. They are still an inconsistent bunch, and the organization just had enough of it. They had a lot of really massive contracts between Adolis Garcia, Framber Valdez, and Hunter Green was set to be paid a huge extension in the future. Currently, Ella De La Cruz has been playing out of his mind and has a chance to be a generational talent as the series moves on. The Reds didn't want to pay for him and Hunter Green and not have enough money to pay out the rest of the team. So they made the tough decision, as they, with the trade mentioned earlier, traded away all those players And in turn, they have now been able to replenish their prospect pool, get some very talented players that they could even swing for future deals, and a couple of stopgap guys like Garrett Whitlock. Elly De La Cruz continues to get better and better, and as a result, his arbitration value has continuously increased. If the Reds can't find any sort of goal in mind, they may trade him in the future, so that way they don't lose him for next to nothing. Your Rockies are still the division leaders for now by 3.5 games over the Diamondbacks. However, we've chosen to stand pat at the deadline. We already made our moves earlier. We acquired Shelby Miller in free agency after the season started. The other move of note was the acquisition of Brian King from the Houston Astros. The goal of this team this season is to not make a huge swing for the fences to try and make this team a World Series contender immediately. We're not there yet. Will it work out? Who knows? But for the most part, this has been a very successful year, as we have been leading the division for most of the season. It's the rest of the division that's been very intriguing. The Arizona Diamondbacks also pretty much stood pat. The trade for Seiya Suzuki has kind of shot them in the foot. He's a free agent entering the offseason, and there's really no one interested in acquiring the right fielder, whereas Ryan Jeffers, as mentioned earlier, the Dodgers did acquire closing pitcher Devin Williams, who helps out their relief pitching a lot. The Padres are in a bit of a quandary. They might be a playoff team considering they still have Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado, and they also acquired Jazz Chisholm this offseason. So you can't really sit there and say they aren't a playoff team. But they have a massive issue. The reason why is because of Michael King's injury. Head fracture. Out for the rest of the year. Who knows if he'll be the same when he comes back. As a result, they can't add anything to their roster. The Padres tried really hard to get. They tried for Ranger Suarez. They tried for Dylan Cease. Both of them way too pricey for them. Both trades fell through. They tried to get Hunter Green. They didn't have the prospect Cincinnati wanted. To remedy this issue, they ended up getting Spencer Arrighetti. Arrighetti wasn't even like a notable pitcher on the trade market. That's just traded the Padres Spencer because they saw how desperate they were to get a starting pitcher. Padres fill in a really bad situation at starting pitcher, and the Astros in return get themselves a couple of prospects to continue resetting the timeline. If they can make the playoffs, and that's a big if, I don't know how far they can go. It really depends on who they end up matching up against come October. As for the last team, the Giants were off to a really slow start when the year began. However, they started to pick up traction and are now in the running for the playoffs, which is why acquiring Mason Miller had to be done. They needed a pitcher. They needed an elite closing pitcher, as Camilo Doval has not worked out as a closing pitcher, and they don't really have much in terms of great bullpen relief. I will say though, Giants, very solid lineup. They are rocking a very solid lineup, and they have a chance to make the playoffs. It just depends on how the cards fall. That is going to conclude the 2027 trade deadline. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. As always, I enjoy bringing videos and streams to you guys. I hope you have a good day, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Be safe out there. Have a good day.